How are you guys doing? Today is Sunday, May 23rd, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an individual GOAT, greatest of all time profile for Aaron Donald, quite possibly the best defensive player I've ever seen in my lifetime. I mean, that's arguable, that's debatable, but I think that it's not debatable that out of all the players for 2021, he definitely stands out as a player he stands out from the rest, especially as a defensive presence. He is one of the very few players that has won almost as many first team All-Pro nominations as seasons played in the NFL. And I'm like, that's just one stat just to kind of point in the direction where this video is going. So today he turns 30 years old. And with this episode, of course, I'm going to list out all the accomplishments, accolades, and achievements that he's been able to accomplish thus far in his career. And I truly believe that he is definitely on pace for a lot more. So if you're unfamiliar with Aaron Donald, he stands at about 6'1", 280. So if you're trying to picture that, he's kind of built like a bowling ball. At the defensive tackle position, 6'1" isn't necessarily that tall, but that's kind of his point. He kind of concentrates a lot of his power. He has a very strong center of gravity. Add to the fact that he's very quick, he's very agile, and just he's very strong for someone that's his size. He has cartoon strength, and it shows virtually what he's been able to do on the football field as a defensive tackle, putting up sacks that would put a lot of defensive ends to shame. So if you're not familiar with him, he's originally from Pittsburgh, like that. He always reps that city, like that's kind of been that's always really been his home. He would establish himself as a good enough high school prospect to get taken from Pittsburgh, or to take for his best offer to be at the University of Pittsburgh. He wasn't necessarily big enough to get to get a lot of other offers, because a lot of times a lot of college football. But a lot of scouts will overlook the size aspect because, that's kind of because you're not really sure. That's kind of a wild card as to how he's going to project. But once he made it to Pittsburgh, he showed he would introduce himself to the national stage, but it would take him a second. His first season in Pitt, his freshman season, he would play 13 games in a season where the Panthers would finish with an 8-5 record. They would end up finishing 15th ranked at the end of the season after they went on to win the BBVA Compass Bowl. But in this season, Aaron Donald would finish with 11 total tackles, 2 of them being sacks. But of course, that's him being a freshman. He would eventually bounce back and come back for a little bit better of a sophomore season. In a sophomore season, he officially became a starter for Pittsburgh. In those games, he would finish with 47 tackles and 11 sacks, in a season in which Pittsburgh would finish with a 6-7 record. They would make the same Compass Bowl and they would lose it, but still Aaron Donald would establish himself as a starter on that team his sophomore year. His junior season, he'd come back for a little bit more. For his junior season, he would finish with 64 tackles, 5.5 sacks in the 13 games that he played. As he transitioned a little bit more and played more defensive tackle rather than kind of on the outside, he would go on to finish he would be given Big East honors the very last season that they were in the Big East. Who would make the first team all Big East compared to his sophomore season, in which he made the second team. And after making the all Big East first team, he would in 2013. Pitt would get moved into the ACC, and in his only game in the ACC as a senior, he would play 13 games in a season where Pitt finished with a 7-6 record. They would go on to win the Little Caesars Pizza Bowl, but this would be his second bowl win, and in his senior season, he would become an all-ACC player. He would become the ACC Defensive Player of the Year after finishing with 59 tackles in the 13 games that he played. He had 28.5 tackles for losses and 11 sacks, a number that he had that replicated his second year at Pittsburgh when he was doing that in the Big East. Regardless, he was able to be dominant on all fronts. He went on to win the Nagurski Trophy, the Chuck Benedrick Award. He went on to win the Outland Trophy. So these are all like best linemen, best defensive players in college football. He was named a unanimous All-American in 2013, and he established himself as a good enough prospect at Pittsburgh to be taken with the 13th overall pick in the 2014 NFL Draft by the then St. Louis Rams, because the Rams hadn't played their first season in LA till 2016. So when Aaron Donald was first out in St. Louis, his very first season, his rookie season would be his age 23 season in 2014. He would start 12 of the 16 games in a season in which the Rams finished with a 6-10 record. And in his very first season, he would establish himself as such a good player that he would be named an all-star in his first year. He would finish with 48 total tackles in those 16 games that he played. 9 sacks at defensive tackle, by the way, might I say. Very tough position to get almost double-digit sacks. 18 tackles for loss. And even though the St. Louis Rams did not make the playoffs, like I said, he would be named. It's very rare for someone to be named to the Pro Bowl in their very first season, not to mention that he was named the Defensive Rookie of the Year, and this is the only season in his career in which he was not named first team All-Pro at the position. Speaking of that, jumping into his very second season, his age 24 season in 2015 with St. Louis, he would start all 16 games for the very first time in his career, while being named an All-Star for his second year in a row and being named to the first team All-NFL for the first time. He would go on to finish with 69 total tackles, which is the most tackles that Aaron Donald has ever put together in a season to date. He finished with 11 sacks. He finished with a fumble recovery, a 40-yard fumble recovery. He finished with 22 tackles for losses, the first time he had more than 20 tackles for loss. And even though the Rams would not go on to make the playoffs, it's the year that Todd Gurley would win the Offensive Rookie of the Year. But Aaron Donald would go down. He would establish himself as one of the best defensive players in all of football by being named a first-team All-Defensive Tackle. This is when the rest of the NFL definitely started to take notice that this man was definitely here and here to stay. And then following his first 2 seasons in St. Louis, the Rams would pick up and move their franchise to Los Angeles. His first season in Los Angeles was his third season with the Rams, his age 25 season in 2016. He would start all 16 games for the second year in a row. He would be named an All-Star for his third season in a row, and he would be named to the All-Pro first team for his first time ever, as he would finish with 47 tackles in those 16 games. He would finish with 2 forced fumbles on the season, 8 sacks, 17 tackles for loss. And this season, the Rams would end up going 4-12 as they lost 3 more games in the previous season, as they were switching between Jeff Fisher and John Fassel right before they got Sean McVay as a head coach. The Rams were not doing that great as a team in their first team in LA, but Aaron Donald definitely was. And after being named to the first team All-Pro for the second straight year, and then being named a Pro Bowler for his first 3 years in the league, the Rams would get a completely new head coach, and they would start to sniff the playoffs. In 2017, Aaron Donald would start 14 games in a season where the Los Angeles Rams would finish with an 11-5 record and make the playoffs for the very first time. For the first time as a franchise since 2004, but the first time, of course, the first time they made a playoff series in Los Angeles since 1989. So, of course, this is very big for the franchise. In this season, Aaron Donald, in his 4th season in the NFL, will be named to the Pro Bowl for his 4th season in a row, and he will be named a first team All-Pro. And in 2017, he will be named the NFL Defensive Player of the Year for the very first time in his career, as he would finish with 41 combined tackles in those 14 games. He had 11 sacks as a defensive tackle, might I remind you. He had 5 forced fumbles on the season, which is his career high up until this point. He had a fumble recovery as well, not to mention 15 tackles for losses as well, and he helped the Rams make it to the playoffs. Once they made it to the playoffs, they ended up losing to the Cardinals in the wild card. This is the season where the Eagles would end up beating the Patriots regardless, but this would be just a taste of what was to come. And this was This is 4 seasons in, and he was already an established 3-time All-Pro at the position, and he was already being named the Defensive Player of the Year. This momentum would carry on until his age 27 season, into 2018. In this season, he would start all 16 games in a season where the Rams finished with a 13-3 record. This would be the best record that the Rams have had as a franchise since 2001, when they lost to the Patriots, when they were the best show on turf. They would go on. This is the year that they would go on to the Super Bowl. But regardless, before that, in this season, Aaron Donald would play all 16 games. And in addition to finishing with 59 combined tackles on the season, the second most tackles he's ever put together in a season to date, he would finish with 20 and a half sacks. That is by far the most sacks he had ever put up in a season, and that it was by far the NFL lead in sacks. So that would probably go down as his best regular season. He had 4 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries. He led the league in tackles for losses with 25. And for the second year in a row, he would be named the NFL's Defensive Player of the Year. And I believe that second Defensive Player of the Year is what earned him greatest of all time status, because it is very tough for a defensive tackle to beat all defensive ends, and a stat that all defensive ends really should be dominating. And he was able to lead his team not only to the best record that they've had since 2001, but he also helped lead them into the Super Bowl as well. That year, they would go on to beat the Cowboys in the first round by 8. They beat the Saints in the NFC Championship off of a last-second play that, of course, Saints are contesting, because that's how bad that's the bad luck the Saints franchise has had in the past few years. And they went on to lose in Super Bowl 53 in Atlanta to the New England Patriots. But still, Aaron Donald will be named the Defensive Player of the Year in Sean McVay's second season. And following that season, Aaron Donald would, of course, come back for his age 28 season in 2019, where he would start all 16 games yet again in a season where the Rams finished with a 9-7 record. Of course, feeling that Super Bowl fatigue after getting so far and losing. Regardless, Aaron Donald would be named an All-Star for the 6th year of his career, for the 6th straight season. He was named a first-team All-Pro for the 5th year in a row. So that's half a decade straight in which he was named. In the 16 games that he played, he would finish with 48 tackles on the season, which is about average to what he's been doing. He finished with 12 and a half sacks on the season, not to mention 2 forced fumbles and a fumble recovery. He led the National Football League with 20 tackles for loss for the second season in a row. And he also was able to log the only safety in his career as well. And after the Rams, even though the Rams simply did not make the playoffs, Aaron Donald was still making his mark felt in the league. Regardless, and then following that, Aaron Donald would transition into a 2020 NFL season, which was heavily impacted by COVID. They would play the same amount of games that they would play in every other season. But, of course, having no fans in the crowd, of course, that would affect a lot of the season, especially with a lot of COVID guidelines and everything. But still, Aaron Donald in 2020 would go on to play all 16 games in a season where the Rams would finish with a 10-6 record. They had the second best record in the NFC West behind the Seattle Seahawks, I believe. But regardless, they were still able to make it. And I think they extended the playoffs this year to add one more team in, but the Rams were going to make it regardless. In this season, Aaron Donald would go on to be named an All-Star for his 7th year in the league. So he's been in the league for 7 years, and he has not missed a Pro Bowl. And he would go on to be named first-team All-Pro for the 6th year in a row, after he would log 45 total tackles. He had 13 and a half sacks last season. That's the second most amount of sacks that he's ever been able to put up in a season in his career. He would finish with 4 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery as well, as he would go on to log 14 tackles for losses, and he would put together yet another all-time season. Once the Rams made the playoffs, they would end up beating the Seahawks at Seattle by 10, but they would end up losing the divisional round in Green Bay against the Packers. But that is the last game that Aaron Donald has played in the NFL. And I think that when we look at the beginning of his career up until now, I think it's very hard for him to put up a better career than he's been able to put up now as a defensive tackle. I think that for his position, considering what the defensive tackle's role is, Aaron Donald's production has jumped so far outside of the role of a defensive tackle that most NFL teams have to game plan against specifically him, which is what makes the rest of the Los Angeles Rams free enough to really kind of dominate at their position as well. Aaron Donald is a very team-centric player. He understands that a lot of what he does is impacting the team, yet he's still able to go and get his numbers. The Rams would not be the team that they are without Aaron Donald, and I think that and I say that in this piece because as Aaron Donald turns 30, this dude has not missed a Pro Bowl. The only season in which he wasn't named a first-team All-Pro at his position was his rookie season, and he was still the Rookie of the Year and a Pro Bowler at that. So with that, I think that we are watching one of the greatest NFL careers in history, and if you ever get a chance to watch him, he's wearing number 9. He's wearing number 99 for the Los Angeles Rams. I want to thank everyone for listening to this piece. I hope all is well. I want to wish Aaron Donald a happy 30th birthday. And with that said, once all of today's exhibitions and matchups are done, I will come back I'll come back tomorrow with another installment of The Elite. I want to thank everyone for listening to this piece, and peace out. I will catch you tomorrow.